Hello friends, welcome to our channel. I hope you all are well and doing great. So today I'm back to continue our UCAT test preparation. As we have started a verbal reasoning practice questions in the last video, and we have completed our 20 questions in that video. So today we're going to continue it from question number 21. Before reading, before continuing, I want to tell you that if you still have any confusion about these questions, about any tutorial, you can freely ask me in the comment section. So let's start our question number 21 without any delay. So here we have a passage which you can read to find out your answers, like this. But it's too much to read and you have very few minutes to solve this question. That's how you can do that. You can read your question and then the options, and then you can use or choose some keywords from that statement to find out your answer from that passage. It will help you to find your answer easily. It will help you to save your time. So let's start. A statement is: the writer believes that there are rational explanations for all coincidences. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. Now you have to tell that the statement which is given, is it true, false, or is there not any relation with the passage, so that you can't tell. So here we have option A, which is true, is correct, because the first paragraph states it makes you feel that this sort of thing happens too often to be pure chance. And the last states, I believe it is possible that friends phone each other regularly and there is a pattern to the communication that they are unaware of. This indicates the skepticism of the author that coincidences are not simply mysterious events. So that's why we have option A, which is true, is the correct option. So let's move towards our next question, which is question number 22. The evidence in the passage implies that coincidences are more likely to happen with relatives. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So here you can use coincidences or relatives as your keywords to find out your answer. So here we have a word coincidences, and you can also find out a relative word just close to the coincidences, and then you can find your answer easily. Okay, so let's see which option is correct. So here we have correct response is B, which is false. So option B is correct because although examples with cousins are referred to in the passage, another example involves a student friend. There is no indication of how likely these kinds of examples are. Therefore, the evidence does not imply greater frequency between relatives. So this is the reason because of which option B is correct, which is false. Next question is, from evidence in the passage, routine behavior in daily life may explain apparently extraordinary coincidences. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So option A is true, or you can say is correct, because the last paragraph suggests this is in relation to telephone communications. Because of this, we have option A is correct, which is true. That from the evidence in the passage, routine behavior in daily life may explain apparently extraordinary coincidences. This statement is correct, is from the passage. Next question we have, or you can say a statement, from the passage, a coincidence is an event which is determined by chance. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So here we have correct response is C, which is can't tell. So option C is correct because it is possible that a coincidence is brought about by pure chance. But the passage suggests that there may be a pattern that we choose to ignore, or there may be a spooky element that we cannot ignore. So here we have a reason that why the option C is correct, which is that we can't tell this statement. That from the passage, a coincidence is an event which is determined by chance. So we have next question, that is question number. The opening statement denies the existence of free will because it asserts that option A, all actions are a consequence of outside forces. Option B, all actions are essentially spontaneous. Option C, it is a religious concept to explain why evil exists. Option D, actions are either forced or spontaneous. So we have option D is correct because the opening statement mentions predetermined and random actions. Option A is partially correct as outside forces refers to the predetermined actions mentioned in the opening statement. But this option does not mention random actions. Option B is partially correct as spontaneous refers to the random actions mentioned in the opening statement. But this option does not mention predetermined actions. Option C is incorrect because the opening statement does not mention religion. So that's why here we have option D is correct answer, which is actions are either forced or spontaneous. So we have the statement that the opening statement denies the existence of free will because it asserts that actions are either forced or spontaneous. Next we have question number 26, which is nature versus nurture. It is a debate on whether option A, people's lives are determined by the state of the natural world. Option B, people's actions are more rational if they are well fed. Option C, people's actions depend on their upbringing or their genes. Option D, genes govern behavior as genes are natural but nurture is not. So here we have option C is correct because it fits best with the ideas in the passage of what counts as the debate over predetermination. Option A and B may well be true but are not part of the dichotomy. Option D is a statement that is not really related to the debate. That's why we have option C, which is people's actions depend on their upbringing or their genes, is the correct. As I say, nature versus nurture is a debate on whether people's actions depend on their upbringing or their genes. Next we have question number 27, which is according to the passage, which of these shows that identical twins can be studied to show inheritance patterns. Option A, when reared apart, they show similar behavioral traits. Option B, they are genetically identical, so react in the same way to stimuli. Option C, when reared apart, they perform differently on IQ tests. Option D, when brought up together, they will share the same experiences. So option A is correct because the third paragraph explains that evidence from twin studies shows that intelligence is inherited and behavior is also largely inherited. Option C is not true as the third paragraph states that the intelligence is inherited. Option B and D do not isolate nature from nurture, so would not help to show inheritance patterns. So because of this, we have option A is the right answer, which is when reared apart, they show similar behavioral traits. Okay, so next we have question number 28, which says that argument of the passage indicates that option A, science has shown there is no such thing as free will. Option B, all of our actions may be predetermined but not predictable. Option C, all of our actions are predictable and predetermined. Option D, intelligence is determined genetically, behavior is learned from parents. So option B is correct because the final paragraph makes the point that our genes may predetermine our actions, but the complex environment we live in makes it impossible to predict our actions. Option A is incorrect as free will may be an outcome of chaotic behavior. Option C is incorrect because the final paragraph explains that our actions may be predetermined but not predictable. Option D is incorrect as the third paragraph explains that behavior seems to display a large degree of inheritability. So because of this, we have option B as correct response, which is all of our actions may be predetermined but not predictable. So the argument of the passage indicates that all of our actions may be predetermined but not predictable. Okay, so next we have that if people who want to live in a national trust property can't afford to do so, the national trust must be treating people unreasonably. Option A, true. Option B, false. And option C, can't tell. Option C, which is can't tell, is correct. Option C is correct because in the fourth paragraph we are told that national trust income from tenants was 44 million pounds last year, a rise of 39% since the 2008 global financial crisis. While wages have remained broadly static. However, if people cannot afford the rents charged by the National Trust, it could be because they are unreasonably high, or alternatively, because the National Trust has to cover its costs and pay for maintenance, improvements, and repairs. In which case, there would be reasonable justification for the land level set. So that's why we have option C is the correct answer, which is can't tell. So here we have, if people who want to live in a national trust property can't afford to do so, the national trust must be treating people unreasonably. So that's why option C is correct, which is we can't tell about this statement that is it drawn from the passage or not. Okay, now next we have question number 30. The rents the National Trust charges tenants have to be high because otherwise it would not be able to spend enough on its properties to maintain the high standards expected. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So here we have again a correct response is C, can't tell. So option C is correct because we don't know if the rents really are high by current standards. At the end of the fourth paragraph, a spokesperson is quoted as saying, "We are spending more than 25 million pounds this year on annual maintenance and refurbishment. We have never invested more than we do now. However, we do not know whether this is sufficient to spend enough on its properties to maintain the high standards expected." So because of this reason, we have the correct option is option C, which is we can't tell about the statement which is given as the rents the National Trust charges tenants have to be high because otherwise it would not be able to spend enough on its properties to maintain in the high standards expected. So this statement is not related to the passage, that's why we can't tell about it. Okay, now next we have question number 31, which says the National Trust claims that its tenants' approval of it as a landlord demonstrates that the complainant's points are unjustified. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So here we have correct response again is C, that is can't tell. Option C is correct because apart from the issue of whether or not the National Trust had failed to undertake repairs in a reasonable time, the fourth paragraph includes the statement. In 2015, 64% of tenants responded were satisfied with us as landlords. This could relate to 64% of all tenants if everyone had responded to the survey, or 6.4% if only 10% responded. For both the question of repairs and for turnout for the survey, this is clearly a can't tell situation. So because of this, the statement which is given as the National Trust claims that its tenants' approval of it as a landlord demonstrates that the complainant's points are unjustified. So option C is correct, that we can't tell. Okay, now next statement we have that allowing National Trust properties to be used as a holiday lets or second homes means the National Trust could be in breach of its own stated objectives. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So option A is true. This option A is correct because after discussing population decline in a Norfolk village, the third paragraph says, yet, in spite of the National Trust's commitments to help meet identified social housing needs, where we are a significant housing provider and favor people who make a contribution to the community conversion of properties into holiday. Let's continues. The National Trust clearly could be in breach of these commitments if it is indeed a significant housing provider in the area. The passage does not say how many properties the National Trust has in the village, but it does confirm a drop in the population from 136 to 113. So here we have option A, which is true, is correct, and the statement which is allowing National Trust properties to be used as a national holiday lets or second home means that National Trust could be in breach of its own stated objectives is true. Okay. So let's move towards the next question, which is question number 33. Based on the information in the passage, women who cycled during and after the First World War were regarded as immoral. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So option B, which is false, is correct because the second paragraph coupled cycling with the idea of immorality. The prospect of a saddle between a lady's legs was considered scandalous, linked to sexual immorality. However, the fourth paragraph tells us later the woman laughed and observed medical quackery and were scornful to the critics. Soon they came to be recognized as sensible modern ladies. So even if they were considered immoral before, sensible modern ladies. So here we have option B, which is false, is correct. False is correct, that based on the information in the passage, women who cycled during and after the First World War were regarded as immoral. So this statement is not true, it is false. So that's why we have selected option B. Next we have the medical condition known as bicycle phase was especially serious for women. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So here we have correct response B, which is false. Option B is correct because the second paragraph of the passage states the doctor warned cyclists about bicycle phase, an affliction which affected men and women equally, but it was considered particularly upsetting for women. Sad faces eyes fixed before them, and an anxious, irritable expression. There was no doubt an example of medical quackery mentioned in the fourth paragraph. However, while the supposed condition was said to be particularly upsetting for women, it was no more serious for women than men. The passage says it affected men and women equally. So that's why we have our option B, which is false, is correct. That the medical condition known as bicycle phase was especially serious for women. This statement is incorrect because it is serious for both men and women equally. That's why we have option B, which is false, is the correct answer. In the golden age of the bicycle, dangers associated with earlier types of bicycle had been largely overcome. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. So correct response is option A, true. So option A is correct because the second paragraph of the passage states that precarious penny farthing bicycles were followed in the 1880s by a safety bicycle that could be used by anyone. Historians see the 1890s as the golden age of the bicycle. Apparently, safety issues, particularly for women, had been overcome by the phrase could be used by anyone. So here we have option A is correct, which is true. That in the golden age of the bicycle, dangers associated with earlier types of bicycles had been largely overcome is true. So here we have this statement is true. So let's move towards our next question, which is question number 36. The emancipation of women by the bicycle was most significant in terms of the changes achieved in how women dressed. Option A, true. Option B, false. Option C, can't tell. Correct response is C, that is can't tell. So option C is correct because the first paragraph of the passage states that the role of the bicycle in the emancipation of women was to give women the freedom to travel while freeing them from body crushing corsets and blowing skirts. The third paragraph goes on to state women cyclists recognized their dress had to change. Corsets, crinoline, and petticoats were to be discarded. However, as Louis J. it indicates the emancipation involved much more than clothes. A new dawn of emancipation is brought about by the cycle. Free to wheel, free to spin out in the glorious country. The young girl of today can feel the real independence of herself as she cycles. This suggests that clothing may not have been the most significant part of the emancipation. So the correct answer is can't tell. So the statement this is the emancipation of women by the bicycle was most significant in terms of the changes achieved in how women dressed is so in this statement have the correct option is C, which we can't tell is not related with the given passage. Okay, so next we have based on the information in the passage, Australia's first steam railway was built in 1854 in Melbourne because option A, the city was determined to beat its rival Sydney in the race for the first steam railway. Option B, local people wanted to travel by train to visit the Yarra River for sport and recreation. Option C, pride and the growing population needed to be moved between the port and the city. Option D, prospectors and the families needed to travel from Melbourne to the Ballarat goldfield. So here we have option C is correct because paragraph 2 states that the plan was to move people and goods between the port and the city and reduce the high cost of shipping goods up the Yarra River. So because of this, we have option C, which is fright and the growing population needed to be moved between the port and the city is the correct option. So based on the information in the passage, Australia's first steam railway was built in 1854 in Melbourne because of this reason, which is given in the option C, which is fright and the growing population needed to be moved between the port and the city. So next question we have that when the decision was made to construct the first steam railway line, the principal investors were option A, the government of the colony of Victoria, option B, shipping companies anxious to benefit from Melbourne's wealth, option C, wealthy individuals who resided in the colony of Victoria, option D, Australians from other states attracted by gold discoveries. So here we have option C is correct because the first paragraph informs us that Australia's first steam railway line was opened in Melbourne in Victoria in 1854. Following a meeting of local people, shares were offered at £50 each, at least Australian $6,100 today. Note that the meeting is of local people, so residents of the colony of Victoria, and if each share cost the equivalent of at least Australian $6,100, they had to be wealthy. So because of this, we have option C as the correct response. So let's see which statement we have, that when the decision was made to construct the first steam railway line, the principal investors were option C, wealthy individuals who resided in the colony of Victoria. This one is the right option. Okay, next we have question number 39. All of the following statements are correct concerning the development of railways in the Melbourne area prior to 1900, except option A, true to its belief in private enterprise. The initial company had organized its affairs well and had successfully taken over other lines. Option B, many new railway lines were established on a wave of enthusiasm but lacked the careful selection of routes and clear demand that is necessary for success. Option C, as some railway companies went into bankruptcy, the only organization with the financial strength to save the situation was the colonial government of Victoria. Option D, the colonial government wanted the state to be in charge of railway services so that it could make a profit from passenger fares and charges for the carriage of freight. So here we have option D is correct because it is the one option for which there is no support in the passage, as there is no reason to believe that the colony of Victoria always wanted to take over the railways. Strong through the belief was in profit and private enterprise when railways were first built. In the end, the railways needed to be bailed out by government. So that's why we have option D, which is the colonial government wanted the state to be in charge of railway services so that it could make a profit from passenger fares and charges for the carriage of freight is true option. Next we have that according to the author, the single biggest problem that long distance travelers faced in the early 20th century was option A, the lack of coordination in timetabling. So there could be lengthy periods of inactivity for a traveler who had to wait for a subsequent train. Option B, the different gauges of track retained in different states, necessitating a change of trains whenever the gauge of the track changed. Option C, the freight traffic seemed to be given priority over passenger traffic. So it was the demand of traders that the railways always seemed most anxious to satisfy. Option D, the limited toilet arrangements or opportunities to obtain food because most people only made very short journeys where such facilities are not necessary. So here we have option B is correct because although there are elements of truth in all four options, B is the only one directly addressed in the passage. When in the final paragraph it is stated, when the Commonwealth of Australia was established in 1901 and the colonies when the Commonwealth of Australia was established in 1901 and the colonies become states, the short-sightedness of having three gauges, narrow, standard, and broad, became evident. Consequently, in 1917, a person wanting to cross the continent had to change trains 6 times. So here we have option B is correct, which is the different gauges of track retained in different states, necessitating a change of trains whenever the gauge of the track changed. Next question we have question number 41, which says, based on the passage, which of the following statements about climate change is a writer most likely to agree with? Option A, if the public are told about its effects, they will know how to deal with it. Option B, what exactly should be done about it is fairly obvious to most people. Option C, the issue is too complicated for the general public to fully understand. Option D, it is worth trying different approaches to motivate people to confront it. So here we have option D is correct because paragraph 1 says it's clear we need to take action on climate change, but it can still be hard to really understand how. That's where tabletop games may help. So the option D is the correct answer. So next we have question number 42. Based on the passage, what does the writer believe is an advantage specific to tabletop games? Option A, they give people the chance to participate in an activity together. Option B, players have to make decisions and consider their consequences. Option C, by bringing people face to face, they allow for better communication. Option D, the content is of greater educational value than that of the other games. So option C is correct because paragraph 2 says while digital and online games are also a powerful way of generating conversations about the climate crisis, the very act of getting around a table to play tabletop games means they create a more immediate opportunity for actually talking and collaborating. So that's why we have option C as the correct response. Next we have, what does the writer imply about games in the magic circle? Option A, people with a lot of imagination tend to win them. Option B, players get the chance to learn from their mistakes. Option C, the best ones are those that relate least to the real world. Option D, they are too often used as an excuse to escape everyday life. So option B is correct because paragraph 3 says that players are given the opportunity to experiment with different strategies and outcomes without real world consequences. So that's why we have option B as the correct response.